In this lesson, we're going to look at our third and final entry type, the confirmation entry. With confirmation entries, we wait for price to come back to the zone, reverse direction, and exit the zone. And that's the point where we enter the trade. In a demand zone, we wait for price to drop into the zone, reverse, and cross above the proximal line before we buy. For a supply zone, we wait for price to rally into the zone, then drop below the proximal line before we enter a short position. For our example of a demand zone confirmation entry, we pulled levels from a grid using a 20-year bond yield ETF with a ticker symbol of TLT on a 5-minute chart. That's the example you see there on the left side of the screen. It shows a zone between $120.81 and $120.91. With those price points on the chart, we can plan out our confirmation entry. Once price comes back into the zone, we want price to move back above the proximal line. To do this, we will have to use either a market order as price moves out of the zone above the proximal line, or another option is to use a stop order, which we'll get into during future lessons. In this example, we would have entered right above the proximal line, where you can see it is highlighted by the blue circle here. Our supply example is again from the 20-year bond ETF, ticker symbol TLT, again on a 5-minute chart. We have a supply zone here between $121.28 and $121.17. And now that we have the price range for our supply zone on the chart, we can begin planning our entry. Since this is a confirmation entry, we're waiting for price to return to the supply zone, enter into the supply zone, and then drop back below the proximal line, confirming supply outweighs demand before we enter our short position. To enter the short position, we'll use a sell short market order the moment price crosses below the proximal line of our zone. Another option is to use a sell short stop order, which we'll talk about in future lessons. Now, there are advantages and disadvantages to each entry type. However, for now, we'll focus on proximal entries for our execution, and we'll go more in depth about zone and confirmation entries later in the course. You now know the confirmation entry, and as you can see, there are a few but subtle differences to each entry type. As we progress further, we'll be using all three entry types based on what the particular trade setup dictates. Before you move on, be able to identify where to enter a demand zone using a confirmation entry, and be able to identify where to enter a supply zone using a confirmation entry. Hope to see you in the next video.